16 million Americans answered the call to serve their country during World War II, and tragically, over 400,000 never returned home. To honor them, each family of a fallen hero received a banner with a gold star to hang in their window. Now, 80 years later, there's another way to ensure that they're honored and, most importantly, not forgotten. So today we are recording live on Veterans Day to bring you the heroic stories of the fallen that are being collected by the nonprofit Stories Behind the Stars. The project focuses on researching and writing the stories of every one of the 421,000 World War II U.S. fallen. Stories Behind the Stars founder Don Milne has been a lifelong history buff, and a few years ago he decided to write a daily story on his own blog called World War II Fallen 100. He ended up writing more than 1,200 stories, and the blog has been read over 1 million times. Well, after his banking job was eliminated at the end of 2019, Don decided to devote his efforts full-time to create Stories Behind the Stars and find volunteers to write the stories of every one of the 421,000 U.S. World War II fallen. Don Milne is here today to share some of the stories and tell you how you can get involved and help research so that they can make sure that every single one of the fallen are remembered. And after that, I will show you step by step how you can possibly find the stories of your own ancestors from your family tree. So let's get started with my conversation with Don Milne. Hi, Don. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you reached out and told me about the project that you're working on. It's fascinating, and the timing is just perfect. But before we get into the details of the Stories Behind the Stars, which I know is the project that you kind of spearhead and is near and dear to your heart, I'd love to put the fallen heroes of World War II front and center, even in this time together. So can you share with us one of the stories that has really touched you, that you have found to be really memorable?
Yes, and it's harder and harder to do that because so far we've already done like 13,000. So how do you pick one out of 13,000 that we've done? But this is one that's one of the more recent ones that we've been doing for our Pearl Harbor project. And the fellow was, I'm going to be looking over to the side here. That's where my notes are on my other computer. His name was Don Boydston, no relation with a first name. But he was on the USS Arizona. So most of you that are World War II, familiar with World War II, will recognize the name USS Arizona. It's that ship, the battleship at Pearl Harbor, that was totally decimated, and more than 1,000 people were killed on that ship. And he was one of those. But if you go to the USS Arizona Memorial, you just see a name on the wall, and that's basically all you know about him. So for our project that we're focusing on right now, is we're actually doing all the names from Pearl Harbor, 2,335 of them, and we've already finished the one for Don Boydston. And just to give you a little bit of information we know about him, is he was from Fort Worth, Texas, and he was the youngest of 6 children, and almost every one of his brothers also enrolled in the military during World War II. His eldest brother, he survived the war. His second oldest brother, he was actually in Hawaii the same time as this young brother Don was there. He was on shore, so he would have probably been looking for his brother right after the attack and wouldn't have found him because he didn't survive and they never found his body. He ended up continuing on in the military, rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel, so pretty high rank in the Army, and he earned the Silver Star while he was leading his men against the Germans in France in 1944, but he died in 1945 while the war was still going on. Another brother by the name of Robert, he served as a lieutenant, and he was wounded, but he survived the war. He lived to be age 90, so Don, who was a young man, the youngest, he probably could have had a full life that he could have survived to live to a ripe old age, but he didn't make it. So another brother by the name of Ward, he joined the Army Air Forces. And anyone that studied World War II recognizes that this was not an easy thing to be in if you were in the aviation arm of the Army, because many people crashed. And in fact, he was on a mission to Tripoli in 1943 in his B-24 Liberator, and his plane went down. So here's a family of 5 brothers. 2 of them survived the war, 3 of them didn't, including one of them who died at the very first day of the war, Pearl Harbor, and one of them died during the very last year of the war. And it's got to be devastating to have a family of 6, 5 sons, to lose 3 of them. But the father of the family, he did something really interesting. He decided that he was going to write letters to the servicemen that may not be getting letters, because back then there wasn't any social media. You couldn't pick up a cell phone and talk to people. You had to write letters, and that was like the thing that all of the servicemen looked forward to, is they wanted to get letters from home. And so he made it a project that he did starting in 1942. He was going to write stories to servicemen, able to write to his son Don, because he died at Pearl Harbor. But he decided, he did this for a long period throughout the war. He started with 137 different soldiers that he wrote to on a regular basis. So I think that's a wonderful thing that I didn't know about. And all of these men and women who didn't come home from World War II deserve to be remembered by more than just seeing a name on a memorial or a gravesite. So there's a lot more Don Boydstons out there.
Wow. That's an amazing and very fitting story. I think about Don's father was in the moment making sure that the soldiers weren't being forgotten. You're in a way, of course, carrying that on today through your project. And as I listen to that story, you realize that you hear one person's story, and really I'm hearing the story of the parents. As a mom, I'm thinking about the mom. I just can't imagine, with all the sons going to war and losing one. And so really through this project, you are really capturing stories of many people, in addition to the 421,000 who were fallen. So, wow, an amazing beginning. And so let's talk about where these stories are. The website is Stories Behind the Stars, storiesbehindthestars.org. Don, what's the mission of that project?
Well, the name of the project kind of tells what we're doing is when they still do this today, and hopefully it's not happening on a regular basis, but during World War II, if a family lost a serviceman or woman during the conflict, they were given a banner with a gold star on it that they could hang in their window. And so we're kind of wanting to tell the stories behind the star. We have the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. Their Price of Freedom wall carries that same motif, has more than 4,000 individual stars. Each one is supposed to represent 100 of the fallen. So Stories Behind the Stars, our mission is pretty ambitious, but we want to make sure that all 421,000 servicemen and women, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, Merchant Marines, every single one of them will have a story. And part of the mission isn't just to have it on some obscure website somewhere, but we want to have it available so anyone can read it at the memorial. So it's got to be super easy to find on a smartphone. I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but that's our mission. And the only way we can accomplish this is we need volunteers that are genealogy minded, that want to do this and do something more than just bring flowers to remember someone on Memorial Day, but create a permanent record that'll go forward for decades to remember them.
Right. As far as the scope and as the fallen, we're talking about all the different branches of the military, right?
Correct. And the Merchant Marines sometimes get left out, but there were more than 10,000 people in the Merchant Marine that died, and the nature of where they were is most of them weren't buried because they went down with the ship. Mm-hmm. So they may be remembered at a memorial someplace, but rarely are they going to have an actual gravesite that they can be remembered by. And not to diss the Marines, but more merchant Marines died in World War II than the Marines. And we all know, the great sacrifice our Marines made for us.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned that you wanted these stories to be really accessible. And I was telling folks when we started out the show that you started with a blog, kind of your own blog. So talk a little bit about what was the impetus to kind of get the blog going? And we're still working full time, so that's a pretty big endeavor to try to sit down and write a story every single day. Tell us about the blog, and then how did that morph into this huge project?
Yeah, I've always been a history buff ever since I was like in 5th grade and saw the movie Patton, and my grandfather was a history professor, and so I went to the library and I got the book A Soldier's Story. That's the movie that the movie Patton was based on, and it's not something most 10-year-olds are going to go get at the library, but I wanted to learn more about it, and that's where the book was. So I went and got that, and I just started a lifelong history of not just World War II, but history in general, but a lot of World War II books. So 50 years later, I'd read a lot of World War II books, and around that time this was in 2016, I got a membership to Ancestry, and I was immediately drawn to the military section because of my background and interest in the military. I said, what kind of details do they have about the military? And as I looked and I said, there's some really interesting source data. And I don't know why the idea popped in my mind. I'm a terrible golfer, and my kids are older, so I was kind of looking for a pastime to maybe do more than just read books. And I think part of where I got this idea was around the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. There were lots of stories where they were interviewing survivors, and the survivors would always say, well, I'm not really the hero. The heroes are the ones that didn't make it back. And so having read a lot of books, I recognized that, and I thought, that's true, but unless you want to spend the time reading the books, and even the books usually don't tell a lot about those people because they weren't there to tell the story either because they died, how are you going to know these people? So I just decided I'm going to just do this as a hobby because I have an interest in the subject. Every day on what would have been someone's 100th birthday, I'm going to write a story about someone that would have been 100 that day, but obviously they never made it because they died in World War II. And my plan was from the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor until the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, I was going to write one story a day. I usually did it on my lunch break at work, and I would research on my bus ride coming into work and on the bus ride back. That's kind of when I did the research. And over the 4-year period, I ended up doing like 1,200 stories. And the blog was WWII Fallen 100 was the name of the blog. I named it that because we're talking about World War II fallen that were recognizing and them on their 100th birthday. And within 18 months, the blog had like 1 million views. So it had an audience, I recognized. But then I noticed I had some people that were reading it were contacting me and said, can I help write some stories? So by the time I was finishing, which, the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II was in September of 2020, I had like 4 or 5, might have been even a dozen. It was about a dozen people that were helping me write this blog. And my whole intention was that was it. We'd be done. It was a nice way to pay tribute to those who didn't make it home from World War II. Because if you do one story a day, it's impossible to do more than 400,000 stories. That would take one person 1,100 years to write one story a day, and it just wasn't going to happen. But about a year before that, it just so happened that my job at the bank I was working at was eliminated. They just didn't need that particular position anymore. And because I'd been there so long, they said, we're going to give you a nice severance. Basically, we're going to pay you a whole year to do whatever you want. So originally I thought, well, I'm going to get another job too and kind of make 2 incomes at the same time. But it turned out that was the year COVID happened, remember, from last year. And so the job I lined up didn't stay around as long as I was hoping to. And I decided, well, I'm really liking what I'm doing with this World War II project. It's picking up steam, this idea that let's not just make this a blog anymore. Let's actually see if we can do this. Let's make this a a nonprofit initiative. Let's find a few hundred, a few thousand people that like to do this, and let's do it. We have the ability, the information is there. We just need people to volunteer. And our goal is that by the September 2025, the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, we're going to have all 421,000 stories done.
Wow, that would be fantastic. That's the this that you're getting done. And I know you mentioned, we said that there's a website, so I assume that's where all of these stories are getting collected. But you have ways to disseminate them. Let's talk about first, though, how you get the stories, because there might be a lot of different sources. I imagine you've got your volunteers tapping into their genealogical research skills.
Yeah, our primary source to start with, because if you're going to get 421,000 stories, there has to be a list, right? There actually is not a publicly available accurate list of who these 421,000 fallen are. So we actually did a pilot project to start us out. At that time, I was living in Utah, and so I had more contacts in that area, and I thought Utah doesn't have that many people who served and died in World War II, because smaller population state. It ended up being about 21,000. So I started off with a list that maybe some of your viewers know about, the National Archives. They have a list of everybody. This book was put together in 1946, so you got to consider that it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's the best they could do at the time, that lists those people who served and died. There's one for the Army and the Army Air Force, and a second one for the Navy and the Marines. Doesn't include the Merchant Marines, but I went to those sources and I came up with a basic list, but then I also went to some other sources like the Deseret News, which was one of the main newspapers in Utah at the time. On a date, I think it was in January of 1946, they dedicated a whole issue to list the names of everybody from Utah who died in World War II. So I had that resource. And there was a few other locations where we found names. So the first thing you have to do is you have to have a database of where the names are at. So if you're doing this as a one-time thing because your great uncle or have a grandparent or a cousin died in World War II, you've got the details of who that is. But if you're expanding beyond that, if you're researching from a state level, we actually have in 14 different states, state directors who are recreating what I did in Utah. And so for those states, we have people that are kind of having a list. So for instance, if you're in Alabama, we can put you in touch with our Alabama director, and you say, I want to help with Alabama names, and they'll send you some, probably from the county that you're from, or if you have another request. So we've got this organized. I was talking to the president of the Friends of the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C., and when she started serving there in her capacity, she used to work at the Vietnam Memorial, and she asked, where's the list? And they said, what list? He says, well, when I was at the Vietnam Memorial, we had a list of all the Vietnam fallen, the 58,000. Where's the list for the World War II fallen? And she quickly learned, as people in this area are surprised to find out, is there isn't one. So one of the side effects of what's going to happen when we're done with this project is we'll have the most accurate, publicly available list of everyone who served and didn't come home from World War II.
So Don, this list, the casualties list at National Archives, it's you can Google it and get it, and they've got it organized by state. I know it says there's no index. So how did you figure out that was not comprehensive?
Well, one of the ways I found out was that article that I found in the Deseret News that showed here's a bunch of names. So
and they weren't showing up on the list.
Yeah, they weren't showing up on the list.
Wow.
And sometimes an example of how this might happen is you might find a crash site with 10 people who crashed, and you might have information from the list of maybe 8 of them that ended up on the NARA list, but there's 2 that not. So we know there's some that aren't there. And sometimes other ways we can find that is counties sometimes have a memorial listing everybody from their county that didn't make it back. So we have people comparing that list against the NARA list. They're going to find names that aren't on there. We actually have a guide for those people that are wanting to become one of our volunteer state directors and say, here's the different places you can look to find additional names for those who didn't make it back from World War II, because it's not going to be complete. In fact, I had one of the surprises I found as I was going through this project is I didn't serve in the military. My grandfather was too old to serve in World War II, and my father was too young. So I didn't think I had anybody with a personal relationship who served, much less died in World War II. But as I was going through this Utah project, I came across the name of Ralph Brady from Union, Utah. And my grandfather's mother's name was Brady from Union, Utah. It's a real small town. It's not even on most maps. So I said, could this guy be related to me? So I did some research on Ancestry and did the family tree stuff, and sure enough, he's my dad's second cousin. So my dad was 7 years old when he died. He died on the first day of the Battle of Iwo Jima. And the even crazier thing is my wife's uncle, he did serve in World War II, and he died. And when I told this to my mother-in-law that I'd found out I had my dad's second cousin, she recognized the name. He says, I bet you he went to high school with my brother. And so she went and pulled out the Jordan High School yearbook for 1943. And there in the band picture is my dad's second cousin and her brother in the band. So not only did they go to school together, they were in the band together. And my wife and I have been married for 35 plus years. I knew that her uncle served in World War II and didn't come home, but I had no idea that he went to school with a relative of my own. So that wasn't something I expected to find. He wasn't on the NARA list for whatever reason, but we ended up finding him indirectly from being in that newspaper list.
That serendipity that just keeps happening, particularly when you're doing genealogy and the connections of people. What a service, really, that your group is doing for the entire United States to finally get this list compiled. You mentioned that you have state directors, which makes a lot of sense. So you've got somebody who's kind of spearheading by state, and then you go out from there and get your volunteers. I assume that the volunteers have to have, well, do they have to have some knowledge? Could somebody who's watching now say, I could work on that, or I'm willing to learn? How do you bring people on board to help you out?
It does attract a lot of people with a genealogical background, but it's not totally necessary. I mean, we've got people with 40, 50 years of genealogy experience that they're just wonderful at doing the research and stuff. But basically what we're asking people to do when we're saying we're writing a story about them is we're not writing a 40,000 page, 40,000 word document. We're basically writing short obituaries. So most obituaries are what, 400 to 1,000 words, and they just include basic information, and that's what we're basically trying to do, because the whole idea is we're not creating stories that someone's going to sit down and spend 2 hours reading. You're going to go to a gravesite. Maybe you're going to Normandy or Arlington or your closest national cemetery, or even on Memorial Day where you see flags put out for all those that are in the military. The idea is you're going to be able to take your smartphone, you'll be able to go up to that gravesite. If he's World War II death, you'll pull up his story and you'll read it right there. So you want something that you can read in, maybe 5 minutes or so. So pretty much everybody can write an obituary. Unfortunately, all of us probably will have to write an obituary sometime, right? But that's what we're asking to do. And we can talk about this some more, but we've created some training, pre-training that gives people all the tools they need so that they'll feel really comfortable about writing these stories. And if they don't consider themselves writers, we have other ways that people can help. They can help with the database. Some people are better at editing than writing, so we have people helping with that. The website MyHeritage, you're probably aware of this photo enhancing ability that they have. So we have some people that do the photo enhancing for us so that we can make the photos work even better. And MyHeritage, they're one of our financial supporters, so we appreciate them not only having that technology but giving some of the financial support. And some people, they like what we're doing here. They just don't have the time. We do have a donor button on our website, so we appreciate the donations that we can take, because we don't take a salary for what we're doing, but we do have some hard costs. And eventually we're hoping to get some major funding, so we have to be paying for our living expenses out of savings. But we think that there will be people that see the value of this as something to support. So we're just moving forward because it's just the right thing to do.
Absolutely. So people can go through your website and volunteer. It sounds like there's a lot of different skill sets that you're looking for. You mentioned the partners and the fact that MyHeritage has been helping you out. And I've seen in watching some of your videos on YouTube that you also, when you open the app, a lot of times you're looking at Fold 3. So tell us, where do the stories end up? Where, if somebody's watching, they're saying, gosh, I know somebody who was in my family who was fallen. I would like to go and see if there is a story there, or perhaps start with contributing their story. Where do they go and how do they find the stories?
Yeah, so Fold 3 was one of the reasons we set this whole nonprofit initiative up. Is I actually contacted Fold 3 when I was living in Utah. I drove down to Lehigh and met with them and told them what I was doing, and they really liked what we were trying to do with this project that I was trying to start. And they were very generous in saying, we would like to give you, basically set you up like a library. So when you go to a library and sit down at their computers, there's lots of stuff that you have access to at a library situation that you can't get at home unless you get a subscription. So they've allowed it so people can go to Stories Behind the Stars, and we've set up a VPN, so you have the institutional version of Ancestry or newspapers, also premium Fold 3. And so people that are helping us with with this project, some people already have subscriptions to these already, because that's just they've been using it, so they can keep using them that way. But if they don't, and if they want to help out, Fold 3 has made it super convenient for people to do that without having to also pay money to get access to that. So we appreciate the help they have there. So if you wanted to do a story about your great uncle who was in World War II, the first place to start would be Fold 3, and just type in his name. It's a real easy search button. You can click the button that says World War II, and there's another button that says Memorial. If you click those and look for that, you will find if there's a memorial already set up for your uncle. And then you can add a story to that. You can start from scratch and do your own story, also on Fold 3. So that's the easiest way to just jump in if you're just going to do one story. Plus, if you want to learn a little bit more things, we've created on our training site, our website training site, we have a course called Doing Only One Story. So if your intention is, I just want to do one story, we'll get you to go through that course, and it takes maybe 45 minutes, an hour to go through those different screens. And it tells you, here's some places you should look, besides what you have in that shoebox with the photos or the letters or stuff, some documentation that you can find online. So very helpful. So even if you don't want to write for Stories Behind the Stars and do people you're not related to, by all means, go to our website, fill out the volunteer form, and then we can get you the information on our training website, where you can learn how to do the research for just that one story.
Fantastic. So somebody could contribute if somebody was just going through and looking at some of the stories, and then they spotted somebody. That would be a way that they could contribute to them, or do their entire story, is go through the special training, like you said. You said also that when they're in a memorial, will this be available at all of them, or just the World War II memorial where they can use their smartphone?
So if you want to look up an ancestor, a family member that served in World War II, and they don't have to have been someone that died in World War II for you to do this, but I would recommend that you go to storiesbehindthestars.org, and you'll see the volunteer form. Put in your name and your email address, and then we'll get you in our database. And one of the links that we will send you is what we call boot camp. The boot camp is a free course that you can take online that you can use to identify, here's where the records are and how you find them and what to look for and what to not forget to look at. We have a spreadsheet that we've set up with, here's where you find this information and here's where you find that information. Where do you find where they're born? Where do you find out where they were drafted? All the different type documents that you would need are in that form. And we have a special separate course that's based on what to do if you're only planning to maybe write just one story. It's a little less detailed, and you may have most of this information already. We have some videos related to this. So for instance, one of the key forms that hopefully you will find is a document called the application for headstone or marker. And that particular document that was filled out by the family member as they were requesting for the individual to have his remains returned to the United States has a wealth of information, particularly tells you what unit they are, often down to the company level. So if you know what company someone's in, company regiment, then you can then go to some other histories about that particular regiment, and that gives you more insights on what they were doing, because you may not know what your great uncle was doing, but if you know what regiment they were in, you can find information online about what that regiment was doing.
Wonderful. And then if somebody wasn't ready yet to donate information or do some of the writing or research, they just wanted to look up one of their ancestors, what's the best way to do that? Do they go straight to Fold 3, or should they come through your website?
If someone's interested in seeing if their ancestor already has a story, I would suggest they go to Fold 3, because that's the central database where all 421,000 stories will be saved. Now at this point we have about 13,000 stories written. So unless that person was from Utah, where we've done all the stories, or unless they died on D-Day, where we've done all the stories, or they died at Pearl Harbor, where we're in the process of doing all those stories, likely they're not going to be able to find it on Fold 3 right now. But it will be there eventually. We always encourage, though, if you're related to somebody, why not have it be you that writes that story?
I like that. Why not? I think that's a great idea. And you certainly have the tools to help them do it. Before I let you go, I know that you know an awful lot about World War II history, and certainly you've been coaching lots of volunteers to do the research. What are some of your top tips for people in doing World War II research? What are some of your favorite resources?
Well, in our case, we're looking for the information that you would have that would be for a basic obituary length article. So we're not going to delve into like letters or stuff, personal stuff that our researchers are going to easily be able to find online. But you'd obviously want to start with ancestry. If you type in ancestry and you put in that person's name in the search, it's good to know what their date of death is or their birth year. You'll pull up a list of hopefully 10 to 12 different documents: census records, draft records, the golden ticket. The one that you want to hopefully find the most is that application for headstone, because of the detail that you'll find there. Marker that they were on the USS Arizona or the USS New Orleans. You can find muster rolls on Fold 3 that would tell you when they were on it and when they got off, if they were in the Navy. So Fold 3 is also a good place to find those original documents. You should also use newspapers as a place to look for information. I remember one story that I was researching, and this guy happened to have an article written about him that this individual had given an award that he won to Red Skelton, because Red Skelton was visiting him as part of the USO show that he was doing, and he just wanted to give this to Red Skelton, so he gave him this award that he'd won. And a couple of years later, Red Skelton was in the town where his father was, and he knew that by this time the son had died, and he went and found the father, and he gave back the award that the son had given to Red Skelton. And that was a story that was on newspapers. So you always want to look on newspapers, because not everybody's going to have a story that's newsworthy enough to be in a newspaper in the 1940s. But it's worth looking for that, because you'll find some interesting information there about 40% of the time. So I would look there also as a place to do research. Newspapers also.
Great suggestions. Gosh, you tell a story like that, it's compelling. And I think of, kids today, we get a lot of superhero movies, don't we? And you mentioned in your video how, gosh, there were some real heroes, people who really sacrificed and served and did it for all of us, which is just amazing. And of course, everybody, those of you watching, you can learn more about it at storiesbehindthestars.org. Don Milne, thank you so much for joining us today here on Veterans Day and sharing these stories. I appreciate it.
Very much look forward to meeting many of the people who watch your videos, and hopefully they'll enjoy what they're doing. I do have to warn them, though, that some of the people have contacted me and said, you've turned me into a monster. Because we ask people, look, we just want you to write one story a week. Can you give up an episode of Netflix once a week? That's basically our model. Is we want to take over your lives. If we get one person to write one story a week, we only need 2,000 people in a country of 300 million to get our project done. But as often happens, people will start doing that and they end up writing 2 or 3 or more stories a day. So I don't want to scare people away, but they're only doing it because they love it so much. And it's a very enriching activity for people who are genealogy minded and also patriotic and want to do something to make these veterans memorials more permanent. You can take the time to leave some flowers at a gravesite, and that's nice, but it'll be so much nicer when visiting a gravesite. Part of the experience is not only seeing that person's name, but pulling out your cell phone and reading his or her story.
Making a difference like Don's dad did, that you told us his story. Oh, gosh. Thanks so much, Don. Wonderful talking with you.
Well, the first thing is don't be afraid to do it.
I suspect you will become addicted like I did. There's no obligation that you have to write 100 stories, and every single story counts.
A guy with no military background or ties at all, no genealogy or research experience, I'm able to make a contribution to World War II history.
It's actually inspired me. I thought I might do a few here or there and help out, and we'd be done in short order. And then you start thinking about how 400,000, I think it brings to life the magnitude of the war.
Reading about individual people is so much more personally impactful than reading about just a battle.
We were able to shine a light kind of on their lives and to let other people know who they were.
These stories really do come home. You learn to you get a greater degree of respect and closeness to these people that sacrifice so much.
And they just deserve so much more. So that's why I love this project.
It's wonderful to be able to come together here today in the live show on Veterans Day and honor the World War II fallen and honor all veterans. And how wonderful that Stories Behind the Stars is making it possible to share that gratitude and remember those men and women every single day of the year. I think in a time of strife in our own country today, what a wonderful thing it is to be able to go and remember, right? And to think about those who have sacrificed so that we are free and that we have a place to bring our children to share these stories. What a wonderful project to perhaps get your kids, your grandkids involved in, or if nothing else, spend an afternoon and visit some of the stories so that they can remember as well and really appreciate the freedoms that they have. Here we are together. It's been wonderful having Don Milne joining us here at the live chat. And I want to take a second, as I promised at the beginning of the show, and show you a little bit around Fold 3, how to find the stories. And no, Don and I did not coordinate our wardrobes for the interview. It was just genealogical serendipity as those things happen. But, great fashion minds think alike, I guess. We had a wonderful time visiting, and I hope that you will get involved in his project. Let's talk a little bit more about the World War II fallen stories, how you can find these. And first and foremost, I want you to know that you can find the show notes for this episode, which is episode number 78 of Elevenses with Lisa, at genealogygems.com/Elevenses. And if you are a premium member, there is also a downloadable handout for you, a PDF, that gives you all the things we've been talking about today. So to go and find the stories, you want to head to Fold 3. And the stories are available for free. So what I would recommend is go to the search box and search on Stories Behind the Stars. You'll find that the very first result is the landing page on Fold 3 for Stories Behind the Stars. And that's really the page. Now you've kind of filtered down into that collection, and you can start to search from here. So if we search for Eldon Jenkins, we're going to click search, and he should show up here at the top of the list. And he does. So there's Eldon F. Jenkins. We click on him and his link, and this should take us to quite a bit of information that's been collected on him. First and foremost, you're going to see facts. And this is the kind of the results of a lot of the research that these volunteers are doing, is pulling together all the basic facts. But then if you click the Stories tab on the Veterans page, you're going to find that fascinating story that is really unique to that individual. And any materials they have found, content they have found, you're going to find references to there. But you can also click the gallery. And here you're going to find the documents that have been accumulated so far. You don't, again, have to have a paid subscription to look at these. You can go through the different documents. If you sign in, you can do more with them. So if you see, if I click here to look at full view, they just want you to have a free account in order to be able to go in and look at those at full view and do other things as well. You can print them, you can annotate, and find information on you can search within the page. So I very much would appreciate if you use our links that we have in the show notes for you. That helps support this free show. It doesn't cost you anything, but we do so appreciate that. It helps us bring wonderful guests like Dawn to the show. And here, if we click on sources back on Eldon's page, you can see each one of those documents listed out. In the upper right-hand corner, you've got several different things you can do here, including if you have an Ancestry subscription. You can, once you're logged into Fold 3, which is owned by Ancestry, you can do that. They also have an indicator. This is a U.S. veteran, and the gold star there showing that he has fallen. So it's wonderful that this is all happening over at Fold 3, but then you can connect it up to your Ancestry tree and information as well. As Dawn mentioned, they have their own website, and that is really focused mostly on the volunteers, because that's really the engine of this whole project. And so that's a wonderful place to see some great examples of stories, and also get those training videos and information so that you can participate in it. And but Fold 3 has really stepped up and provided them the storage for this and incorporated these stories into their memorials. Now, at the time of this recording, which is 11/11/21, Fold 3 is kind of in the process of doing a new user interface. So that's where Dawn was mentioning that not all the stories that have been completed as of right now are all over there. They have them, but they're transitioning to a new user interface on their website. So we would expect, hopefully by December of 2021, just next month, we're going to be seeing a lot more of the stories coming online, and the photographs and images all kind of populated, and there will be more content to take advantage of there. And Dawn talked about some of his top tips. I wanted to kind of revisit some of the top things that you could do, basic steps to get that information that we're looking for. As Dawn mentioned, they're really not trying to do the entire story. They don't want to make it overwhelming or have it, in great narrative, but really it's kind of like an obituary. And so there are many facts that would go into the obituary, and there are some pretty straightforward ways for you to help collect them, both to help their project and, of course, to build your own family tree. Ancestry and heritage, great place to start. Don mentioned looking for all types of records that they have there. Particularly, he mentioned the application for a headstone, which we kind of showed you an example in the interview. Also, muster rolls. My Heritage, as he mentioned, has been really supportive of the project and have been helping them out. And so it's partners like these that come together to make something like this happen. So again, we'll have links in the show notes to these. I wanted to mention to you, if you're watching here live, if you're watching here this first week of the show, the live show, we just sent out an email a day or so ago here at Genealogy Gems because we have a very special arrangement with My Heritage just this week for 50% off their complete subscription that you can take advantage of if you are a new subscriber to My Heritage. So this is a great chance. If you haven't tried them out before, this is a wonderful way to get that complete subscription for an entire year at 50% off. So it's really important that you have to use the link in our show notes for episode 78 in order to take advantage of that. And that will end on November 14th of 2021. Dawn mentioned that the volunteers are using My Heritage's enhancement tool and the colorization. Those are amazing for the photographs, right? They just bring sharpness and clarity, kind of restoration to those photos. And that is something that's included in their complete subscription. Not only can you do unlimited enhancements and colorizations and things, but you also have unlimited storage. So again, a wonderful opportunity for you there. And thank you to both Ancestry, which is part of Fold 3 is part of Ancestry, and My Heritage for, of course, supporting Stories Behind the Stars. And, of course, Fold 3, this is where all the stories are being housed, and that's where all the memorials are. So there, you're going to want to search by name and date. And he was recommending just adding a birth date or a death date along with the name, kind of start there. I found personally that going to the Stories Behind the Stars landing page, as I just showed you, really helps filter down if you're looking for the specific stories. If you want to do the research for an ancestor, or if you're volunteering and want to help research on some of the fallen that they are working on their stories, then you would start more at the global level, right? You'd start on the home page and just search that name, and hopefully you'll have some kind of a birth date or a death date, middle initial, something to help kind of make that person unique in the search so that you can get their results. But they have an amazing collection of military records for genealogy. Really, regardless of which conflict you're talking about, Fold 3 is really kind of the go-to place for military research. And again, we'll have our link to that in the show notes. And then, wasn't it fascinating to hear that the National Archives casualty lists are not complete? I think it's amazing. Here we are at Veterans Day at 2021, and I can't believe there isn't a fully complete casualty list for World War II. In some ways, it's not surprising. There was a great record loss of World War II records, but still, how amazing that this project has kind of brought that back up to the forefront. And one of the ways that Don said that he was helping to fill in those blanks and get the complete list was through newspaper research. So, and what a brilliant idea, because the newspapers at the time during World War II were printing casualty lists. And he mentioned that the Deseret News, towards the end of the war, kind of reprinted a complete list. So, wonderful resource. I would recommend you can look for newspapers for free here in the U.S. at Chronicling America. That's at the Library of Congress. And you can search there. They're not going to have all newspapers by any stretch. I think newspapers are really the one record collection that is just still so incomplete in terms of digital records. But they're going to have free records, and that's a great place to start. And also, then you could move on to record sites like Genealogy Bank, newspapers.com. They all have unique collections. There'll be a little bit of overlap there, but then they'll each have definitely unique collections. Even though those are subscription, you can go in and you can do a quick search and just see, do they have the right newspapers at the right time frame in the right location? You can find that out without having to pay for a subscription. And then if you find what you need, you could subscribe. Again, we have links in our show notes, so we appreciate your support with that. But wonderful ideas. Bill just dropped in and says that Deb has a question. I have Ancestry. Is MyHeritage duplicate to Ancestry? That's a great question because they are each subscription genealogy record websites. No, they're not a duplication. You'll always find some records are on multiple sites. And that happens for a variety of reasons. Some records are just essential, and every genealogy record site gets out there and makes sure that they have them. Sometimes that becomes about because of partnerships. I was just sitting in on a call with Family Search last night, and they were talking about the partnerships that they have going to prepare for the 1950 census, which we've talked about here on the podcast. So there will always be some. You're going to find all the census records typically at FamilySearch.org, Ancestry, MyHeritage, but there are some very unique collections. And one of the things I would say that just really stands out, and I've done an entire video on what stands out, my 10 top favorite things over at MyHeritage, but one of the things is they also have an international focus. So there's a lot of people who I've made connections with people, who live in other countries or countries where my ancestors came from. So there's a lot of international focus. They have a heavy Jewish focus. They have the photographs. I mean, one of the things about their colorization tool, and I'll just kind of mention this because I think it's something we don't think about, but the fact that they have this amazing enhancement and colorization tool has drawn millions and millions of photographs to be added to their website. So even if you don't feel like you want to use those tools for your photos, what we're talking about here is that it has attracted this vast and really unique collection of photographs from all of their millions of users. If you like to find photos of family and documents and locations, I mean, wow, MyHeritage has that too. So they each have their own unique things. The good news is you can search and kind of get a sense of what's there before you make the purchase. But you could certainly go check out my episode on my 10 top favorite things about MyHeritage, kind of what makes them stand out as unique, as all of these genealogy sites do. We always say the best genealogy site is the one that has what you need. So that's it, right? Let me show you another great way to get some additional resources for you right over at our website, genealogygems.com. So here on our archive page for this show, Elevenses with Lisa, this is where you get to all the show notes and all that. We're going to click on today's episode, which is the World War II Fallen and the stories behind the stars. But on every article page, every video page is this categories menu. Go down and click on military. This is going to bring you a perfectly curated list of our top articles, podcast episodes, videos on military research. How to find merchant marine records, the story behind Memorial Day, how to find records for the 5 branches of the U.S. military, women who served in the military. Amazing stuff we've been able to kind of curate over the years. I've had wonderful contributors like Michael Strauss, who's a fantastic military expert. We've got content for you. So if you're not looking necessarily for World War II, but you're researching the Civil War, you're researching the War of 1812, or whatever it is, we have content for you that's going to help you find your military ancestors. And of course, one of the best ways to stay in touch with us is to get our newsletter. And that is on our homepage, genealogygems.com. Click the red button, sign up, and you'll also get a free downloadable PDF when you do that as well, with my top tips. So let me head back here. And I hope that you have really been inspired by the work that they're doing over at Stories Behind the Stars. Perhaps you'll even have an opportunity in your schedule to be able to get involved and to help them. It's a wonderful, patriotic endeavor that they're doing. It's going to benefit many families for generations to come. And that's what doing our genealogy research does, doesn't it? I so appreciate you joining me here each and every week. I hope that you'll click the subscribe button. I'll show you what it looks like. That's what it looks like. And that puts us in your favorites list here at youtube.com. Until next time, God bless you and your family. Thank you so much for listening, my friend, and I will talk to you soon.